Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Lewis Speaks 2025, and today I'm doing another video regarding my life as a gay man. As I mentioned before in former videos, I no longer identify in that context. I have since decided to move towards a spiritual orientation as opposed to a sexual orientation because for 17 years, I've lived my life as a gay man and I found it to be very dissatisfying. And today I'm making this video because recently a lot of gay men have been hitting me up in my DMs, flirting with me, sending me pictures. I've had to block them. And I gotta be honest, I've been tempted to backslide and relapse back into the life. And so I had to remind myself of why I sought release from the life. And I make these videos a lot because there's a tendency to romanticize the past. Oftentimes, when you spend some time away from a certain lifestyle, you have a tendency to glorify the parts that were fun and that were fulfilling, while forgetting the reasons why you initially decided to walk away from that life. There's a tendency to romanticize the past. And so I'm just reminding myself of why I chose to no longer identify within the context of being gay, and also why I chose to no longer associate myself with the gay community. I'll start with how we oftentimes meet as gay men. We oftentimes meet online, usually. It used to be the bars. We still can meet in person, but very rarely do other gay men walk up to other gay men on the street and hit them up. But I've met gay men in libraries, at McDonald's, on the street, in bars, online. I've met them in various settings. And oftentimes it was me initiating contact with them. Online can be really, really dangerous and really, really tricky because you meet a lot of men who either want to remain anonymous or they identify themselves as discreet. Now, those two words, anonymous and discreet, don't set right with me because they imply secrecy. There are so many reasons. Let me just say this. There are so many reasons why a gay man wants to remain anonymous or be discreet. It could be because of work, because of family. They don't want family to know. They either have a wife, girlfriend, or a family that they don't want you to know about. The list can go on and on as to why people want to be discreet, but usually anonymity and discretion imply secrecy and shame. They want you to share their secrecy. They want you to be their best kept secret. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable being some man's secret or being some man's shame. I'm not comfortable with a man projecting his shame onto me and expecting me to share his shame, while at the same time trying to get me to do things that I will later be ashamed about doing, later be ashamed of. And that's a contradiction for me. Let's just unpack that for a second. It's like on one hand, they want you to share their secrecy and their shame, but then on another hand, they're sending you messages, texting you, asking you to do things that you will later be ashamed of. It's just this contradiction, and I just cannot share somebody else's shame. I'm not going to allow you to turn me into a shame container where I'm holding your secrets, or I'm basically blocked and deleted once you have your pleasure, all because you can't be brave and bold and just show who you are. A lot of these men don't even want to offer you a picture. That's another one of my qualms. I'm reading the scripture at Psalms 26, verse 4. It says, I do not spend time in places with men who hide their faces. I don't spend time in places with men who hide their faces. A lot of these men hide who they are. They don't want you to know who they are. They're either sending you a decoy picture, which is a fake picture of someone else, not them, just to get your picture, or they're sending you fake body parts. They're just sending you somebody else's penis, somebody else's butthole, it's gross. And it's like you're never really sure who you're meeting up with. You're never really certain as to if the person who you're talking to is really that person. It's just dangerous. And oftentimes the conversations are very short. The conversations are of a sexual nature. There's no platonic friendship that really comes from these apps. A lot of these dudes, let's be honest, they just want to plug you and move on. They want to get off and then move on. So there's no real care, there's no real concern, there's no real none of that. And the thing about it is this, even if you meet a boy out in the street, even if you meet these boys out in the street, it doesn't matter, because they're still infected with that mentality, with that app mentality, with that bar mentality. I oftentimes say this: you can take the boy out the bar, but you can't take the bar out the boy. And I'll say the same thing with the apps. You can take the boy off the apps, but you can't take the apps out the boy. They still got that mentality where it's a mentality of dehumanization, disrespect, objectification, where they only objectify us as mere parts. We're only seen as a cure for lust, or not even as a cure. We're only seen as a temporary fix and a temporary solution to the problem of lust. And it's just like, there comes a point where you get tired of dealing with that nonsense. I'm thinking about also when I was in the life, did I really have any genuine friendships? No. I didn't have any gay men that were genuinely my friend. I had a bunch of distractions, a bunch of people who pretended to be my friend, but the reality is they never came to see me where I was. They never really invested in me. A lot of times they were battling their own issues and their own traumas. They couldn't really be present for mine. A lot of times the relationship was superficial and only based on going out every Friday, Saturday night. It was only based on what? Talking about the latest conquest. It was only based on mutual self-destruction. When you think about it, it was really based on mutual self-destruction. I always had to have some kind of story to tell, some hard luck story about some man who broke my heart, and that's how we bonded. A lot of it is trauma bonding. A lot of it is trauma bonding. And I feel like in the gay community, there is a lot of that. There is a lot of trauma bonding here. You know, not only with our friendships, but also in our romantic relationships, because I think many of us, and I can speak for myself, growing up, I struggled to make a connection with other men. And so I oftentimes went to the gay community in order to find friendship, find male friendship, because the heterosexual men, they were always trying to compete. They were always just very adversarial with one another. They were just always trying to make fun of one another and trying to quote unquote son one another, trying to make and subordinate one another. And so I don't want to deal with that nonsense. So I went to the gay community trying to find that friendship, that closeness. And I realized that, for one, a lot of gay men sexualized me. They sexualized me. They only saw me as a potential partner, a potential sexual partner, or sex buddy. Trying to find healthy platonic gay friends in the gay community is tough. You can ask many gay men that a lot of their relationships or friendships may have started off with a sexual component. They may have tried to allure them through sexual attraction. They may have realized that it may not have worked out sexually with this person, so they decided to be friends, but Oftentimes in the gay community, your friends are oftentimes people that you slept with in a past life. So there's a lot of that. But also, as I mentioned before, the trauma bonding. You know, you want to get closer to somebody, so oftentimes you'll do things in order to facilitate that. You know, oftentimes we as gay men, we romanticize risk. We see risk as an aphrodisiac. And it's almost like, for example, a man is giving you head. There's a possibility that you may release semen. Now, semen can be dangerous. Semen, the idea of semen, it can be dangerous. A lot of people are scared of semen because of the implications that semen has. What does semen mean between gay men? Oftentimes, the implications can mean possible STD, could be something that is life-threatening. So oftentimes when you're giving head to somebody or they're giving head to you, a lot of gay men, they do fluid bonding as a way to troop bond. You know, they rather swallow a man's semen as a way to connect with him and keep him. You know, a lot of gay men have strained relationships with their fathers. Not all, but some have strained relationships with their fathers. They've had fathers who rejected them, fathers who were not present in their lives. They either had satellite dads who were in the house just kind of hovering over the family, or non-existent fathers, fathers who have left, fathers who may have died early. So they didn't have that masculine influence around. And so there was a bit of a feeling of rejection. So in order to keep a man, they feel as though they have to put their very life at risk. And so what this looks like in real time, you have men out there swallowing semen. You have men out there not using protection when they're bottoming or topping. You have men out there who engage in all forms of risky sex with indiscriminate partners just to get that closeness. You know, and oftentimes I always say this, for some gay men, there's a father wound. You know, it starts off as a wound. And what happens when you don't treat a wound? The wound becomes infected. And if left untreated, that infected wound becomes a disorder. And I'm thinking that's what happened with a lot of us. We had a wound. We had a lot of wound. We had a pain body within us. And what exactly is a pain body? It's energy that's that we lock within our bodies as a result of some really traumatic experiences. And so a lot of us have not dealt with that pain body. A lot of us still carry that trauma. A lot of us still carry that wounding. And oftentimes we never really had anyone who would treat that wound, who would offer us that unconditional positive regard, who will offer us that bonding, that masculine bonding that was not romantic or not eroticized, but it was just something that was platonic and intimate. But a lot of us never got that. I know me personally, I never got that. I never got that closeness with a man outside of the erotic. There always had to be an element of seduction within my encounters with other men. There always had to be this, you know, come hither, you know? I remember a moment in my childhood when I was downtown with my mom, and I remember I was wearing a black shirt, I was wearing tiger print shorts, and I was wearing this pen necklace. It was a pen that was on a string around my neck. And I was walking freely, and my mother, she instilled this fear in me, but it was more so of a protective fear. Like she wanted me to be aware. She noticed other men down in the village. We were in the village, and they were looking at me. They were looking at me, and this made her uncomfortable. So she grabbed my hand and she said, "Those men are looking at you funny." So that instilled a discomfort almost and a fear of men in a way. but also a curiosity. I've always had that. There's always been this fear, but at the same time, this curiosity. I wanted to know who exactly men were. I didn't grow up with any male influences. My father was a heroin addict. He was out there chasing the dragon. And I never really had males in my life. My mother, she had 5 brothers, but a lot of her brothers were either in jail, they were womanizers, they were pimps, they were killers, they were drug addicts. They just were not savory men. And they were not healthy male influences for a young boy. So I think in a way my mother was trying to keep me safe and protect me, but I wish that I did have those influences in my life, because I think it would have made a difference in terms of my decision on so many different things. So yeah, a lot of gay men don't really have that closeness with a man. And there's still a hunger, there's still a yearning. You still want to find that connection outside of a sexual component. And that's why you see a lot of so-called straight men going to gay men, not only because they can have sex, or not only because gay men give head and they do other things, but it's also that vulnerability piece. You can be vulnerable with other men in the gay community. There is a level of comfort being vulnerable. And also, in some respects, you're seen as the masculine one. Whereas in heterosexual circles with other men, you're seen as more feminine. And so it's just a lot. It's just a lot, And me personally, I just got tired of always being objectified, eroticized, fetishized. And that's another thing, Oftentimes, white men, they are not comfortable with black men and I would say this, gay white men. They're not always comfortable with black men in a platonic setting, but they don't mind fetishizing us. Some of them, not all. But some fetishize black flesh, and especially black penis. We're known as BBC, Big Black Cock. We don't have a name. We don't have a history. We don't have any feelings. All we are expected to do is produce a product. BBC. These men get online. We exchange pictures with them. They're fascinated by our size. They're fascinated by us. Fascinated by our buttocks, the length and girth of our penises. They're fascinated. And so they come to visit us, but they never really stay, Or we're always their best kept secret. We're never part of their reality. We're always kept in the box marked fantasy. And what that does, once again, is it dehumanizes people. It turns them into nothing more than just a tool of pleasure, a pleasure device, a dildo. They're just either a butt or a penis. And after a while, you just get sick of that. Initially, you're flattered because they say they want to worship your cock. And you're flattered because finally somebody wants to give you attention. Finally, somebody wants to love you or care for you or invest in you. But that's just a false investment. That's a lie. And plus, there's a form of idolatry in the connections with gay men. They want to worship your cock? No, they need to worship God, not some man's cock. Worship God, not some man's. There's a scripture in the Bible, and it's in Romans, and it says that men have opted to worship the creation rather than the creator. And that is so true, because oftentimes you have these men wanting to worship penis, the creation, as opposed to the creator of penis, God. And so it's just like, there's just an element of idolatry. And in the scriptures, it encourages us not to put any other God before the true God's face. You know, and I think that's what we're doing every time we're sitting here praising the creation, penis, over the creator, God. So it's just a lot of contradictions that I'm realizing in the life. And this is why I opted out. I said, I can't stomach this anymore, because another thing is you can't tell me that you love me, right? And then be willing to put me in danger. You know, I've been in relationships with other gay men, and after some time in the relationship, many have wanted to open the relationship and have broached the idea and broached the topic of possibly an open relationship. And I'm just like, For one, this was not discussed initially when we first met. That's one. And then two, you're comfortable putting me at risk. You're comfortable seeing other men penetrate me. Know that I'm penetrating other men. And you're comfortable with that. You expect me to be comfortable with you penetrating other men. And me being comfortable with that. I can't say that I love you. In good faith, I can't say I love you and be okay with you putting yourself in danger, because that's unhealthy. Having a string of men that you're sleeping with, that's unhealthy. Spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I can't claim to love you, but yet there were partners that were okay with that. They were like, well, you know something, we can play. We can play. And of course you have these rules, right? But one thing about those rules within these open relationships is that oftentimes they're broken because different people bring out different things in you sexually. You don't know what this person might bring out of you. They might want you to try something new that will bring you to new heights of pleasure. And you never really knew that you would enjoy that. But lo and behold, you did enjoy that. And now you're dissatisfied with your partner because they don't do that, or they don't hit the same spots that this other person hits. So it just leaves too much room for confusion, too much room for breakups. It's just a bunch of nonsense. And I see so many other gay men opening their relationships up and later regretting it. Or what they do is they go on a mini break, they separate. And during the separation, each person is out there just sexing it up, going with different guys, blah, 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 blah. And then they come back together. And then lo and behold, either one of them got something, some disease or some infection, and they're just transmitting it to one another. So it's just a bunch of confusion. And I'm at a point in my life where I want clarity. I want spiritual clarity. I don't want to continue to live my life confused. And when you think about it, the devil is the author of confusion. He wants us all to be confused. He wants us all to be in this state of just in a fog, in a state of mental fog. And that's what I think this generation is in. They're in spiritual darkness. And the funny thing is, when you try to introduce them to the Spirit, they reject it because it's not in alignment with their desires. It's not in harmony and in accord with their desires. They want to do what they want to do. And so I hear you. Initially I was the same way. I was out there wanting to do what I wanted to do, wanting to live according to the flesh, wanting to just live my truth, when really I was living my wounds. Gotta be honest, I was living my wounds. But of course, it's packaged as, oh, I'm living my truth. I'm being honest with myself. I'm living authentically. Is it really living authentically, or are you just living your wounds? I know for the longest time I was living my wounds, but a lot of times we're not aware. When we're young, especially in our 20s, we're not aware. A lot of us, let's be honest, your brain fully develops at the age of 26. A lot of us are not fully aware until that time. And even then, we're still making blunders. We lack the awareness. We lack the awareness into the fact that a lot of this has a spiritual component. We don't realize that we are all in the Garden of Eden still. What do I mean when I say that? We're all in the Garden of Eden in the sense that we are all tempted by the fruit of lust. We're tempted by something, whether it be lust, whether it be money, whether it be power, whether it be something. We are all, especially gay men. Gay men, I think we're in the Garden of Eden and we're basically tempted by lust. That's the forbidden fruit. You know, we're told to avoid that fruit, to eat from other healthy gardens, the garden of love, the garden of fidelity, the garden of spirituality. Those are the trees that we can eat from. But here, this tree of lust is off limits. But yet we keep on plucking the fruit and then being ousted from the garden. We keep on being ousted from the garden. So that's what I mean when I say that we're all in this proverbial Garden of Eden, because we're being tempted by lust, by the fruit of lust, and it's reducing us down to dust. It is reducing us down to dust. So many new cases of HIV, AIDS infections, so many men just spiritually, just spiritually dead, you know, and not wanting to be revived, not wanting to be spiritually resurrected, just enjoying the sweet death of endless pleasure, endless risk, endless, just endless foolishness. But when you're younger, when you're in your 20s, you want the experience. Oftentimes, you know, 20-year-olds, they're searching for, especially if they have a spiritual background, those with a spiritual background, they're searching for their testimony. A lot of them can't really connect with spiritual truths found in the Bible and the scriptures and in spiritual texts. They can't connect with those truths because they haven't really lived life. And so they just don't understand the spiritual component, you know? They just think that it's just harmless fun. It's harmless fun to just go out there. I'm just having fun. It's casual sex, casual. We as a generation, both heterosexual and homosexual, have learned the consequences of casual sex. It's not just harmless fun. It actually destroys lives. It can alter the trajectory of your entire life. It can alter the course of your entire life, making the wrong sexual decision. But oftentimes we don't think about these things until it's too late. And then we want to sit down after it's too late and we want to just lament our state in life. But the thing about it is this: listen now. Please listen now. This is why I make these videos also, because I'm trying to wake people up, because I was locked in spiritual darkness. In some cases, I'm still trying to work my way out of the dark. And I'm chasing the light right now. I'm chasing the light. Because I'm starting to see that there's just nothing out here. The love that I tried to get as a result and as a replacement for my father's love, nah, I'm not getting that. Look, I'm going to have to go to God. I'm going to have to go to God for that kind of love, because the love that I was getting out here from these men, it was not love at all. It was dysfunction. It was broken. It was wounded. It was damaged. And I'm not saying that I was innocent and I was this victim, and because I made so many mistakes and so many blunders, but I also realized that that was a result of also participating in this life, because this life will turn you into a monster. It will definitely turn you into a monster if you continue with it. It transforms you and you don't even know how you got transformed. And in a way, you almost transform because you're trying to survive the life. You become the monster that you are afraid of, in a way, if that makes any sense. You know, you become the monster as a way to protect yourself from the monsters. You learn how to survive in this life. And oftentimes those survival mechanisms that you pick up within the gay community are dysfunctional, you know? But it's like when you're working towards healing and you're still in this toxic circle, in this toxic community, how well can you heal if you're still here? You know? It's like you get clean only to go back to dirty water. You get clean only to return back to environments that are unclean. No. There comes a point when as you know better, you do better. And as you do better, you can't return back to the spaces that require you to remain broken, require you to not do better, require your degradation. You know, there's a lot of gay men who get off on your degradation. They want you to be less than. Ever wonder why sometimes the guy will choose the boy who's the hoe as opposed to the boy who is, I guess, not a hoe? The boy who is monogamous, or the boy who is, ever wonder why? Because a lot of these men, a lot of these boys, they choose the hoe because they can do anything with the hoe. They could treat the hoe like a toilet bowl. They could just do any and everything to the hoe, and that's what they want, you know? And the only time, let's be honest, the only time they actually respect the hoe is when they want something. It's kind of like, you know, why we clean our toilet bowls. Sometimes people clean their toilet bowls because they want a comfortable place to take a dump. Not necessarily because they respect their toilet bowls, but because they just want a comfortable place to keep taking a dump. You know? And that's why these boys also go with the hoes, because they want a comfortable place to keep on taking a dump. They want to smack them around, talk to them any kind of way, treat them any kind of way, treat them like a pig and a otter and a freaking animal. They don't want to treat them like a human. The constant dehumanization within the gay community astounds me, because here is a community that talks all the time about equality, fairness, respect, recognition, right? But yet and still they don't offer that to the men that they love. So it's just a lot of contradictions here, you know, and this is why I just can't reconcile these contradictions, because I think in many ways they're just not meant to be reconciled. And this is why I have elected for spiritual surrender, and I have basically just opted for celibacy. I say, you know, just I'll work it out. I'm still navigating this road, trying to figure that out, because I want to know how that will look years from now. But as you know, I have to take it moment by moment. At this point, in this moment, I have to take it moment by moment, because I can't. Even as I mentioned before, those dudes who are DMing me, it's always lust. Lust. What you doing? What you wearing? Let me see that penis. Let me see. And I just think that, truth be told, I don't blame them. You know why I don't blame them? Because this life has made it so that way, that's how we survive. That's what we feel we have to do in order to survive. We feel we have to be this man, this version of man, in order to survive. Because we've learned that trying to be anything other gets you ignored, gets you overlooked. So a lot of gay men are just in survival mode still, trying to survive the life, trying to survive the gay community, fighting for their lives, fighting for their virginity in a way. Trying to fight for their innocence. You know, so many gay men have lost their innocence. And I just want to know, this is a question. What do you think their inner child has to say about that? What do you think their inner child, what does your inner child tell you? about how you've been living. I'm thinking, oftentimes parents who abuse their children, they will call CPS, Child Protective Services, to save the child and remove the child from out that toxic environment. But is there a CPS for your inner child? Is there a Child Protective Service for your inner child? If you can't do it for yourself, at least do it for that little boy in you who wants to be loved, rescued, saved, redeemed. Because we all have an inner child within us that is constantly being assaulted, disrespected, degraded, seen as less. And that's not fair to your inner child. So if you can't do it for yourself, at least do it for your inner child. And so I hope this video lands on your heart. As I mentioned before, I made this video as a way to not only wake people up, but also to help myself in dealing with the cravings to return back to the life, that temptation to relapse and backslide. Because truth be told, I left the life for a reason. I left it because I saw no love. I left it because I wanted God's approval over man's. I left it because I felt in many ways it was taking me away from building a relationship with my Heavenly Father. And anything that jeopardizes or stands in the way or interferes with my relationship with my Heavenly Father, it's got to be removed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's got to be removed. And so is that easy? No, it's not. It's going to require a lot of sacrifice, a lot of spiritual surrender, a lot of prayer, a lot of study, and a lot of just patience. Patience with the process. And so thank y'all for listening. I love y'all. Peace.